Sign it, Adrian. The paper shook slightly in my hands, though I tried not to show it, across the polished conference table. Nolan Pierce leaned back in my chair, my actual chair, with the kind of confidence that only comes from believing you've already won. 3 years earlier, Nolan had been sleeping in his car behind a gas station. Now he was wearing a $12,000 suit and asking me to sign away control of the company I built from a leaking warehouse with second-hand computers. IronVale Systems, my company. The board members avoided eye contact while Nolan slid the document closer. "We can do this the easy way," he said calmly. "Or we can make the fraud investigation public." Fraud. The word nearly made me laugh, because I knew exactly who stole the money. And hidden inside my jacket pocket was a flash drive that would destroy him. But I kept my face blank. That was the trick I'd learned after months of betrayal. Never let the person stabbing you realize you're still standing. So I picked up the pen slowly. Nolan smirked. The board relaxed. They thought I was broken. What none of them knew was that 42 minutes earlier, I had already sent a locked financial archive to federal investigators. And the timer attached to that email was counting down. 6 years earlier, I was delivering takeout during the day and coding software at night. I lived inside a storage loft above an abandoned print shop. The roof leaked every time it rained. Still, I loved that place, because that was where IronVale was born. I built predictive logistics software for shipping companies after my father died, waiting for delayed medical supplies during a hurricane. Everybody told me the idea was too ambitious. Banks rejected me. Investors ignored me. Even my own relatives said I was wasting my life. Then one freezing November night, I found Nolan outside the building. He looked terrible, thin, exhausted, ashamed. "I just need somewhere to stay for a few days," he whispered. "We've been friends since college." Back then, Nolan was charming enough to talk himself out of anything. But gambling debts had swallowed his life whole. I should have said no. Instead, I gave him food, a couch, then eventually a job. At first, he worked harder than anyone. He answered support calls, managed meetings. He kept telling me, "When this company makes it, people will know your name." I believed him. That was my first mistake. The first time IronVale landed a major contract, Nolan cried. Actually cried. We were eating cheap noodles from paper containers when the email arrived. A national freight company wanted a 6-month trial worth nearly $2 million. I remember staring at the screen in disbelief while Nolan grabbed my shoulders. "You did it," he shouted. "No, we did it." That's what I thought back then. Over the next 4 years, IronVale exploded. Investors flooded in. Articles called me a visionary founder. But Nolan became the public face. He loved cameras, loved interviews, loved being admired. I didn't notice the shift happening inside the company. Not at first. Nolan started recommending executives, then replacing department heads, then quietly convincing investors. He was the one truly keeping IronVale stable. Whenever I questioned something, he'd smile. "You focus on innovation," he'd say. "I'll handle people." And because I trusted him more than anyone alive, I let him, until the day my own assistant stopped reporting to me, until the day meetings started happening without me, until the day I realized employees lowered their voices when I walked past. Something was changing, and I was the last person to notice. 3 months before the boardroom betrayal, my banker stopped returning calls. At first, I thought he was busy. Then, my company card declined during dinner with a client. Humiliating silence filled the restaurant. The client pretended not to notice, but I noticed Nolan watching me carefully. That same night, I checked the corporate accounts. Several transfers worth millions had been approved using my credentials. Except I never approved them. My stomach dropped. I called Nolan immediately. "Nobody's accusing you," he said too quickly. Accusing. I never used that word. That was when fear first entered my body. Real fear. 2 days later, our legal department requested a meeting. The room felt freezing cold. An attorney placed documents in front of me showing unauthorized shell companies connected to IronVale. Every signature carried my name. Every transfer pointed back to me. "This has to be fake," I whispered. Nolan looked devastated. Or pretended to. I told him there must be an explanation. That performance almost deserved applause, because he sounded hurt for me, like he was trying to save me. Meanwhile, he was the one tightening the rope around my neck. The board meeting destroyed my life in under 20 minutes. Nobody shouted. Nobody argued. That somehow made it worse. They'd already decided. One board member cleared his throat and said, "For the protection of shareholders, we're removing you as CEO effective immediately." Effective immediately. I built IronVale with my own hands. I skipped meals for it, missed funerals for it, lost relationships for it, and suddenly security guards were standing beside me like I was dangerous. Nolan wouldn't even look me in the eyes. That hurt more than anything, because betrayal from enemies is expected. Betrayal from family rearranges something inside your chest. When I packed my office, I noticed my father's old watch missing from a desk drawer. That watch was the only thing he left me. I searched every drawer twice. Gone. Then I saw Nolan standing outside my office speaking to investors. And on his wrist, my father's watch. He noticed me staring, then casually pulled down his sleeve. That tiny movement told me everything. This wasn't business. It was personal. The media buried me within 48 hours. Founder under investigation. Corporate fraud scandal. Every headline made me look guilty. Friends disappeared overnight. Investors stopped answering calls. People who once begged for meetings suddenly acted like they'd never known me. Then Evelyn left. She stood inside our apartment, holding a suitcase while rain hit the windows behind her. "I defended you for weeks," she said quietly. Weeks. The accusation had only existed for 9 days. "I didn't do this," I whispered. She looked away. "That's the problem. I don't know what to believe anymore." Then she walked out. The silence afterward nearly crushed me. Within 2 months, I lost everything. The apartment, my savings, my reputation. I moved into a motel beside the highway where the walls smelled like cigarette smoke and old water damage. At night, I replayed every conversation with Nolan, every warning sign, every moment I ignored because I loved him like a brother. Then one night at 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. A woman whispered, "If you want your company back, stop pretending Nolan acted alone." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I barely slept after the phone call. By sunrise, paranoia had consumed me. I checked the motel parking lot 3 times before leaving. The caller had texted a single address. A storage facility near the docks. Unit 308. Inside was a black file box covered in dust. And inside that box was the beginning of Nolan's collapse. Hard drives, printed bank transfers, audio recordings, internal memos, all carefully organized, like someone had prepared for war. At the bottom sat an envelope with one sentence written in blue ink. "He monitored your email for over a year." My blood turned cold. I opened one of the recordings. Nolan's voice filled the unit. "Once Adrian gets removed, we move the remaining assets through Northspire Holdings." Another voice asked, "What about the audit trail?" Nolan laughed. "He still trusts me. That's the funniest part." I nearly dropped the recorder. Then I noticed a name attached to the files. Celeste Vaughn, IronVale's former chief financial officer. Except Celeste had supposedly died 6 months earlier in a boating accident. My hand started shaking, because suddenly the story wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something darker. I spent days hiding inside libraries and cheap cafes reviewing the files. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. Nolan had been planning my removal for nearly 2 years. He built shell corporations, bribed executives, manipulated board votes. Even worse, several people inside IronVale knew. They just stayed quiet because Nolan made them rich. Then I found something that made my stomach twist. An insurance policy, taken out under my name. Massive payout, recently updated. Beneficiary Nolan Pierce. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute. That was the first moment I truly believed Celeste's death might not have been accidental. That night, I returned to the motel and found my room door slightly open. I froze. I always checked the lock twice. Inside, nothing looked disturbed, except the black file box was gone. Panic exploded through me. Then I noticed a folded note on the bed. "Stop digging." No signature, no explanation, just those 2 words. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. Nolan knew I'd found the truth. I spent the next week moving between bus stations, libraries, and 24-hour diners. I trusted nobody, but fear sharpened me. For the first time since losing IronVale, I stopped thinking emotionally. I started thinking strategically. Nolan's biggest weakness wasn't greed. It was ego. He needed admiration like oxygen. So I created bait. Using an anonymous industry account, I leaked rumors that a global tech conglomerate wanted to acquire IronVale for nearly $800 million. The rumor spread instantly. Financial blogs picked it up. Investors started speculating. And Nolan reacted exactly how I hoped. He began cleaning hidden accounts, moving money, deleting trails. Every move created timestamps, digital fingerprints, evidence. I tracked all of it carefully. Then I received another anonymous message. "Check Nolan's private office safe." No explanation, just that I shouldn't have gone. But revenge changes your relationship with danger. That night, I slipped into IronVale headquarters during a charity gala using an old maintenance access card that somehow still worked. When I entered Nolan's office, my chest tightened. Everything looked exactly the same. except my father's watch now sat proudly on his desk, like a trophy. The safe was hidden behind a framed company award I'd originally won. That detail alone made me sick. Nolan had rebuilt my office into a museum of stolen things. I guessed the code on the second try. My birthday. Arrogant people always underestimate sentiment. Inside the safe were passports, offshore account numbers, and confidential settlement agreements. Then I found a sealed folder labeled AB. My initials. Inside was a prepared media package meant to release if I ever publicly defended myself. Fake witness statements, edited financial reports, fabricated psychiatric evaluations claiming I was unstable. Nolan hadn't just wanted me removed. He wanted me erased. Footsteps echoed outside the office. I killed the flashlight instantly. Voices approached. Nolan and someone from aboard. I crouched silently beside the desk while they entered. "You're sure he's alone?" the board member asked. Nolan chuckled. "Adrian's too emotional to fight back properly." That sentence stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because I realized something important. He still misunderstood me, which meant I still had the advantage. I escaped the building through the underground parking garage with copies of everything from Nolan's safe. For the first time in months, I felt something dangerous returning. Hope. But hope can make people careless. The next morning, 2 federal agents knocked on my motel door. Someone had reported me for financial fraud and obstruction. Nolan was accelerating. He knew pressure creates mistakes. I answered every question calmly. The agents eventually left, but the message was clear. Nolan wanted me cornered before I exposed him. That same night, I finally met the anonymous caller. Her name was Naomi Keller, former senior accountant at IronVale. She looked exhausted, like guilt had been eating her alive. "We helped forge the transfers," she admitted quietly. My jaw tightened. "Why tell me now?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because Celeste tried to stop him." Silence. Naomi leaned closer. She was collecting evidence before she died. Died. Not passed away. Not lost. Died. The choice of words mattered. Then Naomi slid a small key across the table. Celeste left something hidden if anything happened to her. My pulse quickened. Where? Naomi swallowed hard. Somewhere Nolan never thought to look. The key led me to an old train station locker downtown. Inside sat a battered laptop and several notebooks. Celeste had documented everything. Dates, transactions, secret meetings, even recordings. But one file changed everything. A private video. Celeste looked terrified. "If you're watching this," she said shakily, "Nolan already knows I copied the records." My throat tightened. She continued. "He's planning to move the remaining company assets during the Innovation Summit next month." The Innovation Summit, IronVale's biggest annual event. Investors, media, live streams, thousands watching. That was when Nolan planned to finalize everything, which meant that was when I needed to expose him. Then Celeste said one final thing. "Adrian, if he removed you, it means he still fears you." I sat there in silence for a long time afterward. Nobody had spoken my name with kindness in months. And suddenly, the loneliness hit me harder than the betrayal. Because revenge stories sound exciting until you realize how empty survival can feel. Still, I wasn't done, not even close. I spent the next 2 weeks building my case carefully. No dramatic confrontations. No emotional messages. Just evidence. That was the difference between anger and strategy. Anger screams. Strategy waits. Naomi helped me trace offshore transfers connected to Nolan's private holdings. Each discovery painted the same picture. He wasn't just stealing from IronVale. He was preparing to abandon it after cashing out. Then we discovered something horrifying. Several employee retirement funds had been quietly drained. People who trusted the company with their futures were about to lose everything. That changed the mission for me. This stopped being about revenge alone. Now it was about stopping a collapse before innocent people got destroyed. Meanwhile, Nolan's public image kept growing. Magazine covers, podcasts, interviews about ethical leadership. Every time I saw his face, rage burned through me. But rage without control would ruin everything. Then 3 days before the Innovation Summit, I got a message from Nolan himself. "We should talk." Just that. No threat. No explanation. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. And deep down, I needed to see his face one more time. Nolan chose an expensive rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The same place where we celebrated IronVale's first $1 million contract. That detail wasn't accidental. Everything Nolan did was psychological. He arrived smiling like old times. Adrian. Hearing my name from him again made my skin crawl. For a few minutes, he talked casually. Business, weather, memories? Then his tone changed. You should have disappeared quietly. There it was, the real Nolan. Cold, controlled, certain. I looked him directly in the eyes. Did you kill Celeste? He didn't even blink. That's a dangerous accusation. Not a denial, a warning. Then he leaned back calmly. You know what your problem is? You think loyalty matters more than power. I stayed silent. People follow whoever wins, Adrian. That sentence revealed everything. To Nolan, relationships were transactions. Friendship was leverage. Love was weakness. Before leaving, he placed my father's watch on the table. I figured you'd want this back. But when I reached for it, he stopped me. After the summit, he said softly. Then he smiled, assuming you're still around. I barely slept the night before the Innovation Summit. Every possible outcome ran through my mind. Failure, exposure, arrest, death. Because once this started, there would be no turning back. Naomi and I finalized everything at dawn. Encrypted files, backup uploads, legal packages prepared for investigators and media outlets. If Nolan tried stopping one leak, 10 more would follow. That was the beauty of patience. By the time powerful people realize they're trapped, every exit is already gone. At noon, I received confirmation that federal investigators had accepted the evidence package. Then another message appeared. Unknown number. Someone inside the board is warning Nolan. My stomach dropped. The timeline was collapsing faster than expected. By evening, the summit venue buzzed with celebrities, investors, and reporters. Meanwhile, I walked through a side entrance wearing a catering uniform. Nobody recognized me. That hurt more than I expected. I built IronVale, yet somehow I'd become invisible inside my own creation. Still, invisibility can become a weapon. And hidden beneath the serving tray in my hands was a device that would end Nolan Pierce's empire forever. The ballroom looked unreal. Crystal lights, live orchestra, massive screens displaying the IronVale logo. My logo. People toasted champagne while praising Nolan for saving the company. I moved quietly through the crowd, pretending to serve drinks. The closer I got to the stage, the calmer I became. Strangely, the fear disappeared. Because after losing everything, there's a certain peace in finally having nothing left to protect. At 9:40 p.m., Nolan stepped onto the stage. The audience applauded instantly. He looked confident, untouchable. Tonight, he announced, IronVale enters a bold new future. That was my cue. I activated the upload device beneath the tray. 3 seconds later, every screen in the ballroom went black. Confused murmurs spread. Nolan frowned. Then Celeste's face appeared on every screen. The room fell silent. Her recorded testimony played in perfect clarity. Nolan's smile vanished. Then came the audio files, the shell accounts, the forged transfers, the insurance policy. The room erupted. Investors stood up shouting. Board members panicked. Reporters rushed toward the stage. And finally, Nolan's own voice filled the ballroom. He still trusts me. That's the funniest part. I watched the exact moment his empire cracked. Chaos swallowed the ballroom. People screamed over one another. Phones recorded everything. Security rushed toward the control room, while reporters surrounded the stage. Nolan kept trying to regain control. It's fabricated, he shouted. But panic had already reached his eyes. That was the thing about truth. Once people smell it, lies stop sounding confident. Then federal agents entered through the main doors. The room froze. Nolan spotted me near the back wall. Recognition flashed across his face. For a moment, neither of us moved. It felt strangely quiet despite the chaos around us. Just two men staring at the ruins of the same dream. Then he pushed through the crowd toward me. You think this makes you a hero, he hissed. I looked at him carefully. For years, I'd viewed Nolan as larger than life. Now he just looked tired, desperate, small. You already destroyed yourself, I said. Agents grabbed him seconds later. He struggled violently, shouting, threatening, begging. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd stayed arrogant. Because beneath all the manipulation and greed, I could still see traces of the friend I once loved. The next morning, every major news outlet covered the scandal. IronVale stock collapsed temporarily. Several board members resigned immediately. Federal investigations expanded fast. And suddenly people started calling me again. Apologies, sympathy, requests for interviews. Funny how quickly public opinion changes once cameras point elsewhere. But the call that mattered most came from an elderly attorney named Walter Green. He'd represented my father years earlier. There's something you should know, he told me quietly. We met that afternoon. Walter handed me a sealed document my father left before he died. I stared at him in shock. Why did I know about this? Because your father instructed me to release it only if IronVale was ever taken from you unfairly. Inside was a legal contingency agreement. My father had convinced me years earlier to structure one hidden class of founder shares differently. I barely remembered signing it, but those shares carried emergency voting authority under fraud circumstances, meaning legally, I still controlled IronVale, even after everything Nolan did. Walter smiled slightly. Your father believed successful people attract dangerous friends. For the first time in months, tears hit me unexpectedly, not from revenge, from realizing my father still protected me even after death. The emergency board meeting happened 2 days later. This time, nobody avoided eye contact. Fear changes people quickly, especially wealthy people. Several executives tried pretending they'd been manipulated by Nolan. Others claimed ignorance. I listened quietly. Then I placed the founder share documents on the table. Silence filled the room. One attorney adjusted his glasses nervously. You still retain controlling authority, he admitted. The irony almost made me laugh. They spent months treating me like an outsider. Meanwhile, legally, I still own the final word. Some board members immediately began praising my resilience. That disgusted me. Cowards always rush toward whichever side looks safest. Still, I kept my emotions controlled. Because revenge isn't screaming. Revenge is watching people realize they gambled against the wrong person. I removed 4 executives that day, not out of spite, because they enabled corruption. There's a difference. Before the meeting ended, one board member quietly asked, "What happens now?" I looked around the room, slowly. "Now," I said, "we rebuild what greed almost destroyed." But deep down, I knew rebuilding would be harder than revenge. Returning to IronVale headquarters felt surreal. Employees stood silently as I walked through the lobby. Some looked ashamed, others emotional, a few genuinely relieved. But the building no longer felt like home. Too many memories had curdled inside those walls. When I entered my old office, I froze. Nolan had changed almost nothing. Same furniture, same shelves. Even the tiny crack in the window from our first winter there remained. Like he wanted to live inside my life completely. Then I noticed something sitting on the desk. My father's watch. This time for real. No games. No threats. I picked it up carefully. The leather strap felt worn from years of use. Suddenly, I remembered my father telling me, character is what remains after success leaves the room. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did, because losing IronVale showed me exactly who people truly were. Later that evening, Naomi handed me a final report. More hidden debt, more corruption. Nolan's damage ran deeper than anyone realized, which meant my war wasn't actually over. It was only changing shape. Over the following weeks, investigators uncovered more crimes tied to Nolan. Bribe, tax fraud, corporate espionage. The deeper authorities dug, the uglier things became. Then another twist surfaced. One of IronVale's investors had secretly financed Nolan's takeover from the beginning. His name was Victor Lang. Billionaire, political connections, dangerous reputation. And suddenly I understood why Nolan became so fearless. He never acted alone. Victor requested a private meeting. Every instinct told me to refuse, but I went anyway. He greeted me warmly inside his penthouse office. "Impressive recovery," he said. I stayed silent. Victor poured himself a drink casually. Nolan was ambitious. Ambitious people become useful. Useful. That single word explained everything. Victor viewed people like chess pieces. Then he leaned closer. "You won your company back. Be satisfied with that." A warning disguised as advice. I realized then that exposing Nolan threatened powerful people far beyond IronVale, which meant this story could still become dangerous. Before leaving, Victor smiled faintly. "Your father was smarter than you know." The comment chilled me, because somehow Victor had known my father. I started investigating Victor immediately. Old court records, financial partnerships, political donations, and eventually I found the connection. Years earlier, my father refused to sell a transportation patent to one of Victor's companies. Weeks later, my father's business collapsed mysteriously. I sat staring at the documents for hours. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Victor targeted vulnerable businesses. Nolan was simply the newest weapon. That realization changed everything emotionally. This wasn't only about betrayal between friends anymore. It was generational. My father fought these people before I even understood who they were. That night, I visited my father's grave for the first time in years. Rain soaked through my coat while I stood there holding the old watch. "I finally understand," I whispered. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to grieve properly. Not just the company, not just the betrayal. My father. My old life. The version of me that trusted too easily. Then my phone buzzed. Naomi sounded terrified. Victor's legal team just requested access to internal IronVale archives. I frowned. Why? Her voice dropped. Because there's something inside those records they desperately need buried. We found the files hidden inside archived logistics contracts. At first they looked ordinary. Then Naomi noticed altered shipment routes tied to overseas shell companies, human trafficking investigations, illegal transport activity. My blood ran cold. Victor's network wasn't just corrupt, it was monstrous. And IronVale's software had unknowingly been used inside portions of it. I suddenly understood why Victor looked nervous during our meeting. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. We copied everything immediately. Hours later, IronVale servers experienced a coordinated cyber attack. Somebody was trying to erase records. Luckily, we'd already moved the evidence offline. That night, a black SUV followed me for nearly 20 minutes. Fear clawed through my chest again. But strangely, I no longer felt powerless. Because people only threaten you when they're scared of what you know. The next morning, federal authorities expanded the investigation publicly. Victor vanished from the media overnight. Several executives connected to him resigned from major companies. And suddenly, the entire empire surrounding Nolan started collapsing piece by piece. Still, despite everything, one question haunted me. If Nolan had simply asked for help years earlier, would any of this have happened? Nolan requested to see me 3 weeks before sentencing. Everyone advised against it, but I went. The detention center smelled sterile and cold. When Nolan entered the visitation room, I barely recognized him. No designer suit, no confidence, no audience. Just a tired man in a gray uniform. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed bitterly. You actually beat me. I looked at him quietly. This was never supposed to be a competition. That seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. He stared down at his hands. You know the worst part? He said softly. I think somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I deserved your life. The honesty shocked me. Not because it excused anything. Because it sounded painfully human. Nolan swallowed hard. I did care about you once. Once. Past tense. I should have hated him completely. But emotions are rarely that clean. Before leaving, he asked one final question. Was any of it real? I thought about the garage, the cheap noodles, the laughter before greed poisoned everything. Yes, I answered quietly. And somehow that truth felt more tragic than revenge ever could. 6 months later, IronVale finally stabilized. Employee retirement funds were restored. New leadership rebuilt public trust slowly. Victor Lang faced federal prosecution, and Nolan received 12 years in prison after cooperating with investigators. People kept expecting me to celebrate, but victory felt quieter than I imagined. One evening, I stayed late at the office watching city lights flicker beyond the windows. The building was silent, peaceful, for the first time in years. Nobody was trying to take something from me. I opened the bottom desk drawer and pulled out the old photograph Nolan and I once took inside that freezing warehouse. 2 broke friends smiling beside borrowed computers. Before greed, before lies, before ambition turned love into competition. I stared at the picture for a long time. Then I placed it back inside the drawer carefully and closed it. Not because I forgave him completely, and not because I forgot, but because carrying betrayal forever eventually lets it own part of your life. I lost years learning that. As I left the office, my father's watch rested against my wrist again. Steady, familiar, a reminder that success means nothing if you lose yourself protecting it. And sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't destroying the person who betrayed you. It's surviving long enough to rebuild without them.